Welcome to Toronto Police Communication Services. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you some insight into what you can expect in the job as a part-time communications operator. What might you be getting yourself into? Communication Services is the public safety answering point for the City of Toronto. As such, we answer all 911 dialed calls within the City of Toronto. We are also responsible for dispatching a police response to those calls for service.
There are two distinct functions of the communications operator position, the first being 911 emergency and non-emergency call taker, and the second as a police dispatcher. You must be successful at both functions to continue employment.
The role of a 911 operator or police dispatcher, whatever you want to call it, is a highly stressful position. As such, you will be well paid. We hire first as a part-time communications operator, and the salary is as indicated. However, generally speaking, within the first year, you'll move on, and we provided the opportunity to move on to a full-time position. Part-time is a permanent position. It is not contract. And during your training, you will be required to work full-time hours, and that's 32 weeks within the first year.
Toronto Police Service has a comprehensive benefit package, which will kick in as a full-time member after 6 months and as a part-time member after you have completed 1,044 hours. This generally also adds up to 6 months of your employment. However, as a part-timer, this only includes the hours that you are scheduled to work, not overtime hours.
For those internal candidates who may be watching this presentation, please be aware that there is an onus on you to investigate the impact of being reclassified to a part-time communications operator. Don't expect someone else to do it, and don't leave it until the last minute. Something else to be aware of as an internal candidate is you will get first opportunity when full-time positions become available, as it's based on seniority as well as marks within class.
You will be paid bi-weekly. Depending on your start date and where the service is within their pay period, your first paycheck may not be until after your third or fourth week of service. Ensure that you budget for that. As a part-time employee, your pay will always be 2 weeks behind what you have worked until you are reclassified to full-time status.
Part-time communications operator is an entry-level position, as it were, into communication services. As you spend more time within communication services, from a part-time position, you have the opportunity to go full-time. Further levels of promotion exist within operations supervisor and the senior operations supervisor. As well, for full-time communications operators, there are opportunities to do lateral moves within the unit in our radio or our phone training or CAD sections as well.
There are days that will challenge you for your entire shift, and there are days where you're going to feel like you robbed the city for your wages. However, those days are very few and far between. You will be dealing with sensitive issues, such as sexual assaults, domestic violence, mental health issues, and deaths. These will be the worst days in somebody's life, and there will be a range of emotions directed at you, including panic, excitement, argumentative callers, aggressive callers, people who are eerily calm and very vague. You will need to deal with a multitude of accents or languages while obtaining and processing information as quickly as possible. One day you may simply be call taking and processing events for service. The next you will be dispatching events and responsible for ensuring the safety of dozens of officers at a time. There's very much a team dynamic at play here. However, you must be able to function independently in the job you are assigned for the day. For example, when you're talking to a person who is threatening to jump off a bridge, it is your responsibility to ensure that the call for service gets to the appropriate dispatcher while you're developing a rapport with the caller and attempting to de-escalate the situation.
Communication Services is a 365-day, 24/7 operation. We are the answering point for 911 calls in the City of Toronto. We don't get statutory holidays off or weekends off. Emergencies occur at all hours of the day, and the Toronto Police Service works diligently to ensure the safety of our public, no matter the day or time.
Working shifts is mandatory. When you're assigned a platoon schedule, you will be expected to report to duty on those dates. We have 2 different shift schedules, the first being a 12-hour rotation. We have a day shift that runs from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and a night shift from 6:45 p.m. to 6:45 a.m. You can see as the colors are showing up there on the screen, your day shifts are yellow and the night shifts are blue. You're required to work 2 or 3 days in a row with a couple days off in between. The schedule allows for the member to have every other weekend off.
The 8-hour shift is a 5-week rotating schedule. Day shift works 7 days in a row, starting on a Friday. Afternoon shift commences on a Wednesday and is 8 consecutive days. You'll note that the first Wednesday of that shift is lightly colored. We also use that as a training day. And when we have in-service training, our platoons are scheduled on those Wednesdays to receive that training. Our midnight shift starts on a Monday night and is 7 days in a row. This schedule, as mentioned, is a 5-week rotating schedule. The 12-hour shift is a 4-week rotating schedule.
You will be assigned either the 12-hour or 8-hour shift according to the needs of the service. Your platoon will be determined while you are in class training.
Shift work comes with pluses and minuses. Friday got me like, maybe not this week. Maybe it's Tuesday got you really excited to be off for a few days during the week. If you have children, guess what? You can go on school trips. But it may be that you're working Christmas Day shift this year, or you could be working Easter night shift. So large family events may have to be changed to accommodate your schedule. You are required to show up based on what your schedule is for that week. You may be required to work mandatory overtime. If there's a snowstorm and night shift, day shift usually is having a hard time getting in, night shift may have to wait until enough people are in that they can go home. Doesn't happen very often, but it is something you need to be aware of.
Your training will begin in the classroom for 7 weeks, where you will learn the policies and procedures on how to process 911 and non-emergency calls for service. You will then move to your assigned platoon and complete 10 weeks of on-desk training with a trainer plugged in and sitting beside you. During your on-desk training, you will be working the shift schedule of that platoon. We will then give you a few months to acclimate to taking calls on your own. You will still be on your assigned platoon working their schedule. You will then be brought back into the classroom to learn how to dispatch police resources. Once you have successfully completed the 5 weeks in class training, you will return to your assigned platoon for another 10 weeks of on-desk training while the trainer sits beside you. To receive your certification as a communications operator, you must be successful in both call-taking and dispatching training programs.
You must also be aware that during your on-desk training, we will receive 4 evaluations to describe to you how you're performing. You must be successful in both class and on-desk training as both call taker and dispatcher to maintain your employment with Toronto Police Service. Should you be unsuccessful at any aspect of your call take training or dispatch training, unfortunately, you will no longer be employed by the Toronto Police. In-class training takes place Monday to Friday, 7 to 3. Call take that 7 weeks of in-class, dispatch it's 5 weeks in-class. And we train out of 3 different locations across the city. Primary being for the start of all classes is at the Toronto Police College on Birmingham. We also train out of our primary site in the Don Mills and Eglinton area and our backup site in the Dufferin Finch area. Although we identify Monday to Friday as our primary times, there will be times when you will be required to work afternoons or weekends so that we can accommodate observation opportunities for the class members.
During the classroom portion of training, there are daily quizzes, weekly exams, and a final practical exam to see if you can put it all together. The first 3 weeks of class require a high level of study and memory work. Our citizens are expecting that when they call 911, you will know what needs to be done to help them in their moment of crisis. You do not have the luxury of looking up information, putting them on hold to ask someone, or passing the buck to let somebody else decide. You must know what the service policies are and how to respond in a moment's notice. If you have been away from school for a while, this might be especially challenging for you. We often hear from our trainees that the level of study required for this job was leaps and bounds from what they did in college or university. Be aware that you will need to carve out significant amounts of time to study for the first 2 months of your employment in order to be successful. You will be assigned a training manual in both sections of your training. Each manual is about 2 inches thick on 8.5 and 11 paper. They have several policies that are in there, and each addresses the different nuances that you may receive in a call. For example, if you had an accident, there are various types of accidents that may occur. It may just be a simple fender bender, in which case the parties can exchange information and go to the collision reporting center. It does not require police response to the scene. However, if somebody was injured, we will most definitely be attending that location. If there is property damage involving a pole or a knockdown sign, or if somebody is impaired, that also requires a different response. So these policies incorporate all of those different nuances that you may receive when receiving a call for service.
Applicants must be aware that this is a very restrictive work environment. You will essentially be tethered to your desk by your headset. Breaks and lunches will be scheduled and will be dependent upon the workload. Although our workstations are able to raise and lower, you are required to be at your computer for lengthy periods of time. Opportunities to go even to the washroom must be cleared with the operations supervisor, as we have minimum staffing that must be met at all times.
You'll also be working in a very rapid pace environment. It's going to require intense concentration for extended periods of time. As a call taker, you can be processing upwards of 100 calls in an 8-hour period. This requires you to actively listen to what the caller is saying and what they're not saying, what you're hearing in the background, and making sure that that information gets to the dispatcher in a timely manner. As the dispatcher, you can be responding to multiple officers calling on the radio and dealing with more than one major event at a time.
As one can imagine, the work environment is very stressful. You're going to be exposed to difficult situations, such as suicidal callers, shootings being called in, someone calling in they've just been stabbed, someone calling in that their child is missing, someone calling in that they've woken up next to their spouse who has passed away during the night, and multitude different kinds of violent crimes in progress. The rapid pace can take a toll. Toronto Police has numerous opportunities for you to help deal with that stress. Our employee assistance plan, our psychological services wellness visits, our critical incident response team debriefs. As individuals, though, you must also have a plan in place to help you deal with the stress on a day-to-day basis.
As we are an emergency service, we are mandated to have a specified number of personnel to answer 911, and we cannot leave our phones or dispatch positions unmanned. As a result, we can never be late for duty, as each shift relieves the previous shift. We implement this lateness policy during the testing and interview process for this position. As testing and interviews are scheduled back-to-back, anyone who is late will impact the next testing session. As a result, anyone who should be late for future testing or interviews will not be allowed to participate.
There are educational requirements and documentation that will be required should you be successful through the testing phases and after the interview stage. Be prepared to find your college diploma, your high school grade 12 diploma, whatever your level of education is. Make sure you know where it is now, because it will be hard, may be hard for you to find at a later date. If you are educated outside the province of Ontario or outside Canada, there are other educational requirements, educational equivalency that you're going to have to be able to have supply for us. You must receive this educational equivalency, and documentation must be presented to the employment unit upon request. So we encourage you to make sure that you take those necessary steps ahead of time.
Let's get to the testing part of this now. Phase 1 and Phase 2 testing will occur on the same day. Both tests are performed through the Critical program. Phase 1 includes a short-term memory test, spelling test, sentence clarity, reading comprehension, and a typing test. You're required to type a minimum of 40 words per minute. While the service requires that as a minimum, you can only imagine that in a stressful moment, you would need to type a little bit faster than that. I would recommend at this point in time that you start practicing your typing and improving that skill, as information will be thrown at you very quickly, and it is your responsibility to accurately capture the details and disseminate the information as quickly as possible. Only applicants who are successful in Phase 1 will be asked to remain and complete Phase 2.
As indicated, Phase 1 and Phase 2 testing are held on the same day, but again, only successful candidates from Phase 1 will be invited to continue in the testing process. Phase 2 of the critical testing evaluates your computer-related multitasking abilities, keyboarding, data entry, memory retention, call summarization, and performance under stress.
Only candidates who are successful in Phase 1 and Phase 2 will be invited to take the PERFECT test. PERFECT stands for Performance Exam, and it is a telecommunications simulator test that evaluates motor skills, hand-eye coordination, multitasking, memory retention, and performance under stress.
Only applicants who are successful in all 3 levels of testing may be considered for an interview. Should you be successful, a study package for the interview will be provided. Members who have been successful in the interview and have been scored well will be provided conditional offers of employment. A medical exam must be passed before hiring. Vision and hearing standards must be met before employment.
So what are we looking for in a candidate? Strong listening skills is definitely required. What the caller is saying and often not saying, what our officers are inferring in their calls when they're requiring backup to attend. You must be able to adapt to changing information as it comes at you while providing excellent customer service, which is a requirement for you to apply for this position.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. Hopefully you've gained some insight into what might be expected of you as a part-time communications operator. We hope to see your application.
For more information about this position, please visit the website www.tps-hra.ca.